What's up, y'all? You know what time it is? It's about to be that time.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
And we're back. One Piece, 1095. Wow, we are living in unprecedented times. And the feast that we are about to eat, I don't know if anybody's ready for it. Like, the amount of information that could come from this, or could not, will set the community ablaze either way. And we're going to do something a little different today, but, you know, we always kind of do things a little bit different. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the actual chapter. You know, I'm going to speed blitz through a couple of things that I found interesting in the chapter, but this video realistically is how much of this flashback are we going to see? What could we see? Who will show up? And I guarantee that I'm going to mention some names that you probably haven't even thought of, and hopefully in the comments some people can mention things that I haven't thought of. But I've been thinking about this for a while, and the fact that we now know that God Valley is in the West Blue, it opens up even more doors for who's going to be here. So that's going to be, you know, really exciting when we get into that. Saturn is casually throwing around the word human being, which goes back to what we were talking about last week. Is he even a human being? Is he a deity? Is he a demon? Is he a devil? Is he something? Is he really a mythological creature? What are we actually going to get into with One Piece? What are we doing with these characters? Was there really a Nika? And then the devil fruit came from Nika, and, you know, we're dealing with souls, all kinds of crazy stuff. Either way, we know that Saturn is as old now as he was 38 years ago, which just furthers the point that these guys have been around for centuries. Oda has an obsession with killing characters' moms, and man, that has not stopped. But the most brutal one was Clap, because it just came out of nowhere. And Kuma's face when Clap got clapped, ooh.
Savage. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here.
We hardly knew ye. RIP to the King of God Valley as well. We know from 1086 that the game that is happening on God Valley, Figurlin Garling is going to win that. So even though he is negative 10,000 points right now, he wins. So there is going to be a slaughter of the highest degree, and by the end of this, Shanks' dad is going to be the most ruthless character in the series. I don't know if I'm ready. Little bit of math piece. Said the likelihood of Doberman being in this chapter was high because his birthday was here, and sure enough, he was in the chapter. He didn't do anything, but he was there. If we didn't take the unplanned break, this chapter would have come out last week, which would have been the 4-year anniversary of Sengoku telling us about God Valley. So that actually could have come out on the anniversary. So we are 4 years and 1 week from getting all of that information as far as like issues are concerned. But my favorite thing about this chapter is probably just the end, that Ivankov actually is going to be a part of Kuma's flashback. It opens up so many doors, and that's what we're going to get into now. So here we go, guys. But first, like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. The implications of everything here go so deep. Okay, I mean, I've got notes, guys. I've got names, I've got ages. There are so many opportunities here. But the real question here, and there's actually two ways that this can go, because we are in Kuma's flashback. This is from Kuma's POV, it's Bonnie's POV of Kuma's POV. So we're kind of got some layers of Inception going on here. Are we going to get this flashback from the omniscient narrator point of view, where we can actually jump around and then see the perspectives of characters like Rox and Roger and Garp? You know, we know that there are going to be major players here. Or is this going to be an intrinsic, like, focused story on Kuma becoming friends with Ivankov and Ginny, who will likely die. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about, is Ginny Bonnie's mom? Is Ginny Luffy's mom? I think Ginny is the character that, is basically a red herring for the flashback that is ultimately going to die. And that'll be like one of the sad things when most likely Shanks' dad, Big Figureland, is going to come in and take her out.
Savage.
And then maybe the rest of them get saved by either Roger, Garp, Rox. More likely than not, probably Rox, because on this channel, we believe Rox is a good guy. Even if he went about things the wrong way, his intentions are pure, especially in the midst of this particular genocide that is going on, right? They are here for these resources, and Rox is probably coming to God Valley in the West Blue to make sure that they don't get those resources. And if Dragon plays a role in this particular flashback and sees what Rox is doing, that may be the impetus for what happened in Marigeau in the first place, attacking their resources, getting rid of their food supply, everything that they were going after in God Valley in the first place. Like, hey, let's make sure you guys can't eat, can't do this, we'll free some slaves, blah, blah, blah. It was basically just a reversal of all of that. And we're probably going to see this flipped and redone over and over until we end this story. Now, the other thing here that could happen, which would definitely bum out a lot of fans, myself included, but, ultimately we'll get all of God Valley here, but Oda could stick with Kuma and everything that Bonnie was able to see within the paw and just kind of go through Kuma's life. So we may see him become friends with Ivankov and Ginny, get saved, escape, become the king of Sorbet, join the Freedom Fighters, become a warlord, be Bonnie's dad, and then ultimately give himself up to, Vegapunk and get killed by Saturn and all of that. And then come back just in time for Kuma to arrive on Egghead and do a sacrifice play for Bonnie and everyone else. I saw someone bring it up in the chat. Dizza mentioned it. What if Kuma removes the fatigue from Luffy, right? And I love that idea because why show us that he has this ability if it never comes back in a positive way for us? But the thing here is that Luffy would then want to fight Saturn. So at that point, Kuma's got to palm away or something. And it's like, yeah, go get your captain at Elbaf. Something like that. For argument's sake here, let's say we are getting God Valley in totality. What's going to happen? Who's going to be here? Who's going to be on each faction? And this is the fun part, right? I legitimately went through, did math, which even though I'm now the math piece guy, I do not like math, but I do love figuring the story out. So I've got ages for characters here and things that make sense. I've also cross-referenced everybody that could be in the West Blue at this particular time, who was either born in the West Blue or operated in the West Blue, and that's going to be a fun part of this as well. First, let's start with potential slaves or villagers, okay? So we know that we've got Kuma, we've got Ivankov, and we've got Ginny. At this particular time, Kuma is 8 or 9 years old. Ivankov is 15. We have no idea what Ginny is. One of the characters, I'm just going to hit the ground running with this. One of the characters that I want to see the most is Crocodile, okay? Because Crocodile is 8 years old during God Valley. We've talked about this before, but now that we know that Ivankov is involved, we could actually find out what that secret is. I would love to see 8-year-old Crocodile either be a slave or a villager, someone that's traveling around. Maybe he's a chore boy for Rox's crew, something. Anything that gets my boy here. And if, for argument's sake, he is biologically female, right? One of those 6 chests could have the hormone fruit, and perhaps he wanted to hide the fact that he was a slave, have no connection to God Valley, and that's the reasoning for the gender swap. Now, I do believe that Crocodile realistically probably was male, and that, the secret here really could just be that he was a slave, or something that happens during this flashback could be that secret. And this is just such a perfect time to really get into that and add so many more layers to that conversation and Impel Down. And who knows, maybe the Suna Suna Sand fruit is in one of those chests as well. And this is realistically where so many major players in the One Piece world got their devil fruits in the first place. Now, one of the other big ones is Moria. Moria is 12 years old, but, I don't really want to just say that every warlord was at God Valley, but Moria was actually born in the West Blue. So while he may not be a slave, he may actually be a resident of God Valley and gets swept up into all of this. His parents get killed, something like that, just for being on the island, but he manages to get away. There's a lot of ways to just turn this into the tragic jumpstart, trampoline for all of these major players. What do we need individual flashbacks for everybody when we could have one flashback that tells the most traumatic day possible for everyone? Back in Thriller Bark, Moria and Kuma had a very long conversation about Crocodile's removal from the Warlord system and Blackbeard's rise. Now, if they have history during God Valley, then there are more layers and nuance to this scene, because potentially Kuma is talking to a friend or, a war buddy, essentially, someone that he went through a terrible thing with, and he's coming to give him some news about someone that they may have also spent that day with, Crocodile, and they're now talking about the successor of Rox's will. A lot of layers to this. Love it. Is Moria's connection to God Valley the reason why Doflamingo was sent by someone higher up to kill him at the end of Marineford? Was there some sort of an agreement amongst the warlords that were present at God Valley that they needed to maintain their strength and never diminish the power of the name Shichibukai, otherwise they would send the full force of the government to take them down? Following on the warlord trail of it all, Mihawk was 6 years old during this time, so I don't know if every warlord needs to be involved in God Valley, but it would be interesting if Crocodile and Mihawk had this sort of older brother, younger brother situation while they were maybe slaves together, which would be pretty wild. We brought it up in the stream. What if Mihawk has a ton of scars on his back from being a slave? That would be wild and add such ridiculous context. There's so many layers to everybody here on this list. Could Marco either be a slave or a resident? He would be 7 at this particular time. Was he already maybe a chore boy for Rox as well? Or is this where Whitebeard gets his first crewmate or, his first son? Another interesting one that could fall into a number of different categories is Dedan, who would have been 17 during this time. Would she have been a resident? Would she have been a slave? Could she have been a very young member of the Rox Pirates that was ultimately saved by Garp and owed him a favor that he eventually cashed in 16 or so years later? When it comes to the faction of the Marines, we know at the top of everything is Garp. Garp will be 40 years old during this flashback, and he will be dubbed the hero of the Marines for his efforts here. Now, I'm expecting this to be sort of a Smoker and Alabasta situation. Whatever Garp does here, the laurels that he gets for this is going to be something completely different from what actually happens. Sengoku said that Garp and Roger were protecting the Celestial Dragons and their slaves. Now, I think that part might actually be true, but the fact that Rox was a bad guy, I think is the propaganda. I think that Roger and Garp might have been on the wrong side, and since Roger looks at Garp as if he's one of his own crew because of how many times they've fought over the years, if Rox is going after Garp, Roger may just step in to protect him. And while we're talking about Roger, we'll just get through that pretty quickly. Roger is 37 during the God Valley flashback, and Rayleigh is also 40 like Garp. We don't know how many members of the Roger Pirates will be active at this time, but this will also be where Roger ends up finding Shanks in a treasure chest while he is 1 year old. How Shanks ends up in a treasure chest is the question. Will it be one of the chests that is holding one of the potential devil fruits, one of the 6 chests that we saw today? Probably. That would be the best case scenario. Will Shanks's mom hide him in one of those chests? His dad never really knew what happened, and then maybe the mom dies, so no one ever really knew what happened to Shanks until many years later. One of the major twists of the God Valley flashback, I think, will tie into a long-running theory that Dragon, at one point in his life, was a Marine. And here, he could very well be a rookie Marine at just age 17. That's how old Dragon would be during this flashback. And, who's also 17? Sakazuki, Akainu. They could have been rookies that came up together. Think about it, every time he sees Luffy, he never calls him Luffy, he calls him Dragon's son. Like as if he's got a vendetta against him, right? And how great would it be if both of them were there at God Valley, but took 2 different opinions, right? We already have Kuma and Ivankov here, so Dragon being here makes total sense. But if he's a Marine that, takes his hat off and, throws away the logo after seeing everything that's going down, and then is instrumental in helping Kuma and Ivankov leave, right? And that's why they pledged their life to him, why they're, so down for the freedom fighters, so down for the Revolutionary Army. Everything that's here builds the freedom fighters. This is the start of it. And we said that Dragon should be playing a major role in chapter 1100, 1,000 chapters from his introduction. If this flashback runs that length of time, we may not even see Dragon in the main story. We may just get to the moment where the freedom fighters are established in chapter 1100 in a flashback, or the Revolutionary Army is established in flashback form in 1100. Or we come out of the flashback and say like 1099, and Kuma has arrived on Egghead. He's doing his sacrifice play against Saturn, and all hope is lost, but then all of the Revolutionary Army ships are outside of Egghead. Sabo, Ivankov, and Dragon are all taking care of some of the ships, and this helps the Straw Hats escape. Seeing all of this destruction for 17-year-old Sakazuki could also inform why he did what he did in Ohara. If he is just used to, the genocide of it all, or maybe he was instrumental in accidentally letting Roger leave, and then Roger ended up doing something that affected him in his life. Maybe Roger at one point is responsible for the death of one of Sakazuki's family members, something crazy, or just the toll of everything. Becoming the Pirate King, starting the Great Pirate Era. The destruction that Roger would have created and inspired ultimately informed Sakazuki's actions during Ohara to say, I'm not going to let this happen again. There could be a Roger on these ships. I'm just killing everybody. Another really interesting thing here is that if this turns into a situation where we are seeing Sakazuki's perspective of all of this, right? And we just saw him a couple of chapters ago with Kuma. So if they had an interaction on God Valley, that could be pretty wild. If Sakazuki was a kinder Marine that saw all of this destruction and was responsible for maybe allowing some of these individuals to get off of the island, but then seeing what they then went on to do in the world, because like I said, this is a trampoline for so many people, right? So much death and destruction would eventually come from all of these pirates that were born from this incident going out into the world, right? Maybe Sakazuki is responsible for saving Roger, saving Kaido, saving somebody that eventually went on to kill a bunch of people or inspire a bunch of people to kill other people. So when he eventually gets to Ohara and there are innocent people leaving, he has now become so cold that he's like, no, I'm not letting this happen again. Everybody's dying. Those people could turn against us at some point, like what happened for the retaliation of God Valley. Sengoku would have been the same age as Garp, 40 years old. I do not believe that he went to God Valley, because when he told that story to all of those young Marines in 957, it really felt like it was secondhand information and that he was drinking the God Valley Kool-Aid. So I don't think that he's going to be there. I also am not really sure that Suru would be there, even though she's 38 during this time. Would be interesting to see Kong, because we've never seen Kong do anything. We don't know his age, but, we can assume that he's probably older or, in that age range. Kizaru was also active during this time. He was 20 years old during God Valley. So if he was there, then it would ripple into echoes that are happening during Egghead, right? Because Saturn appears to be playing a role in the God Valley incident as well. It seems like they are actually there. They're not getting that information somewhere else that the Buccaneer got away. Seeing Kizaru and Saturn have some sort of an interaction on God Valley would be interesting as well, since we've seen a few different instances of them interacting now in the present. Brand New would have been 18 during this time. We could just see him in the background. I don't expect him to do much. Kuzan would not be here because he was only 11 years old, which actually makes everything that happens on Ohara better, because unlike Sakazuki, he would have never seen anything like Ohara, so all of his reactions would be more natural, whereas Sakazuki would have already lived through God Valley, so this Buster Call would mean nothing to him. If Zephyr is canon, he's 36. I don't know how old Diaz Barrels is, but, maybe we know that he was a Marine at some point, just like Drake, so maybe we could see him just off somewhere. The Rocks Pirates. We have no context for who or how old Rocks would be. We just know that in terms of silhouettes, he is about as tall as Luffy, it would seem. When he's surrounded by all of these, much taller people, it seems like he's just a normal man. My feelings on Rocks have never changed. I think that he did not get his elaborate crew from a Davy Back fight like some theorize. I think just like Luffy, he had this intense charisma that actually drew all of these people to him. That he knew things about the world government, and with that, created a very strong team to try and topple the world government. But the thing is, just as Saturn says in 1095, oh, you're a crew that sticks together, we have several instances that imply that the Rocks Pirates did not effectively work together properly, even to the point where Kaido seemed to have defected or run away during the God Valley incident. So Sebek may have been able to get all of these people on board, but he wasn't able to keep them on board. Charlotte Lin Lin, Big Mom, would be 30 years old during the God Valley flashback. She will have had 29 kids and would either be pregnant with or have just given birth to Charlotte Montdor. And that's the scarecrow-looking kid with the book fruit. Yeah, she was getting busy. The oldest child would be Perospero, who would be 12 years old. Katakuri and his, twin brothers Daifuku and Oven would be 10 years old. Whether or not they were following around on Rocks' ship with her, we don't know. But that would be kind of crazy if Rocks was riding around and there was just 29 of Big Mom's kids on the ship at the same time. Whitebeard at this time was 34, Kaido would be 21, and we know that he was an apprentice on the crew. Other pirates that have been confirmed to be on Rocks' crew are Shiki, Wangzhi, or Ochoko, and Captain John. Characters that have been speculated are Higuarashi, Kurozumi Higuarashi, right? Because when she used the Mane Mane fruit, she was able to transform into a young Shiki and potentially a young Buckingham Stussy. Bakin was very likely on the Rocks Pirates as well. I feel like that was the implication when she said that she used to sail around with Whitebeard. For years, people have speculated that Shaki could be on the Rocks Pirates because she said that 40 years ago, her and Garp used to tussle around. Well, what was God Valley? 38 years ago. Timeline kind of matches up. And with Roger and Rayleigh potentially being here conveniently, this could be where Rayleigh and Shaki meet, which is kind of fun, right? Maybe a little love story amongst all the chaos. Come on, Oda. Now let's get into some wild picks. Kureha, Doctor of the Rocks Pirates. It's heavily implied during Drum that she was a pirate at some point. That's the way I'm reading into things. She would have been a ripe 103 at this time, so she's probably in the prime of her life. Because here, if there was this beast of a man that Kureha took in and was very motherly with and, wanted to help tame and keep in check, right? But then he went off and became one of the worst pirates in the world and was killing a bunch of people, right? Then she would see this other monster like Chopper and be reluctant to go down that road again. I'm adding a little more nuance than we'll probably end up getting. Honestly, it's very likely that Kureha won't even be a part of this. But considering that she knew who Roger was and was like, no, Gold Roger, huh? That's what they're calling him now? Like, if she was a part of God Valley and then the Rocks Pirates split up, and then from that moment on, she just went and just hid in Drum and just cut herself off of the world, like, that's kind of interesting to me. Next up, Zeph. Zeph would have been 29 years old. We don't know if the Cook Pirates were active at this particular time. Maybe he assembled the Cook Pirates afterwards. But what if he was the cook on the Rocks Pirates? Like, wouldn't that would just be insane? And we would just elevate all of these characters from the past. Don Chinjiao was known to have a bunch of run-ins with Garp, and he also would have been 40 years old during this time. Maybe he was on Rocks, or the Kano Kingdom is in the West Blue. Could he randomly just be on God Valley because his home turf was the West Blue? I don't know, but the connection can be made. One of my favorite possibilities for this flashback is that a 30-year-old Hiraluk could be here. If we don't get Kureha, if we do get Kureha, I don't need Hiraluk to actually be a member of the Rocks Pirates, because I don't necessarily look at Hiraluk as somebody who's really combat inclined at all, right? He was known as a thief, but that could translate as being a pirate. He had a pirate flag. He was very interested in pirates, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that he was one. He could have just been a thief, and we know that he operated in the West Blue. And God Valley being so abundant with resources, that could have been a major target for a thief like Hiraluk. He doesn't necessarily need to get involved in any of the fighting at all, but if he was an observer, an onlooker, and got to see all of these monsters and titans go up against each other, it would inform everything that he said to Chopper about how great pirates are. That they have voices that can tear the sky asunder, right? Because he would have seen it. He was there on God Valley. And going a little further is Saturn being an Ushi Oni. If Saturn was to transform and had any sort of interaction with Hiraluk, Ushionis are known for having poison that gives you an incurable illness. So, theoretically, if Hiraluk had a run-in with Saturn and got that illness, and then had to go off to find the Sakura trees to cure the illness that eventually probably came back and ultimately took him out, that's such a crazy connection, right? And then let's take it even further. Is this where Roger gets his incurable illness? If he has a run-in with Saturn and ingests that sort of poison, if Oda wants to go this route with the Ushioni, right? I mean, it's all a possibility. But Roger will die 16 years after God Valley, and 16 is a very interesting number that we've seen come up across the story. Luffy rings the bell 16 times. Dofi's got the 16 bullets attack, 16 holy bullets. What if Saturn's poison gives you 16 years? In the Ushi-Oni lore, it attacks you a lot faster or whatever, but, what if it was the early onset of it? I don't know. We're spitballing. We're throwing things at the wall. All of this is just spitballing. But more on the Hiraluk thing. His Vivre card originally said that he was born in the West Blue and then was later changed to the Grand Line. Was Oda trying to hide something from us, right? That he saw that, he's like, no, I don't want to give that away. Reprint that. Some people think that Blackbeard's going to play a role here. He's 2 years old at this time, so that's definitely not going to be the case. And in my opinion, I think it will eventually come out that Rox was a good guy. He wanted to free the slaves. He wanted to stop the world government. But the world is going to present him as this really evil guy. And the bad story of that is eventually what's going to reach Blackbeard. Whereas the good story of that is going to be what inspires people like Dragon and Roger. Roger doesn't even start looking for the poneglyphs and the One Piece until after God Valley. So he must have learned this information from Rox. And considering that Rox has a pirate flag that has a flaming skull on it, some people have theorized maybe Rox has the Maramara no Mi, Ace and Savo's fruit. Maybe he's got the Darkness fruit. Maybe he's got the Goma Goma no Mi and, the Nika fruit, right? I think that he's a Lunarian. And if he is an oppressed race, then that gives even more credence for why he would go so hard to save these people and take down the world government, because his whole family was wiped out. And he would probably find something interesting in Kuma, who is also of a race that genocide has been committed against. And if Rox is a Lunarian, then that informs why Kaido was so keen on getting King on his crew, because he already knows about the Lunarians. And Kaido showed that he knew what a Lunarian was when he talked to King. So he had to have some sort of prior relationship with Lunarians. If Dragon is inspired by everything that Rox is doing here, right? He takes Kuma, he takes Ivankov, he starts the Freedom Fighters, eventually the Revolutionary Army, and he's actually living out what Rox wants to do, take down the world government the right way. Shanks and Buggy are both 1 year old here. Does Buggy play a role? Are there two kids in chess? How then do Roger and Rayleigh eventually come across Buggy, right? It almost feels like these two have to be taken as a pair. It feels like they grew up together. Big News Morgans was 15 at the time. So if they were on God Valley, this could be the trampoline for them to want to start a news organization, because no one got accurate information about what really happened on God Valley. So maybe they would have decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to make sure that information is always spread correctly when things like this happen. Another place that is in the West Blue is Ohara. Clover would have been 67 years old. Olvia, just like Dragon and Sakazuki, would have been 17. Did Dragon have any sort of interactions with Olvia over the years? He shows up at Ohara with flowers because he knew Clover, he says, but did he also know Olvia? I'm team Robin is Luffy's half-sister. But either way, if Clover was a part of all of this, then, maybe he could speak to some of the things that are here, right? Imagine if Clover started talking about poneglyphs and Crocodile is listening to Clover talking about poneglyphs, and maybe Clover drops the name Alabasta. And then Crocodile becomes a pirate with a goal in finding the poneglyph in Alabasta. Or Rox says it. But either way, Crocodile knew what the ancient weapons were. He knew what the poneglyphs were, and he knew that Alabasta was important. How did he find all of this information out? Probably because he was at God Valley and overheard some of this stuff and pocketed it for his entire life. Revolutionary Army members that were born in the West Blue. Morley, who would definitely have been alive at this time, and Ushianu, who we have no context for. An interesting Shanks connection is that Ben Beckman was 12 years old during the God Valley incident. Could they have bonded from being involved in the same incident? Shanks wouldn't remember any of it, but Ben would be able to tell him. All of the members of MADS were old enough at this time. Vegapunk would be 27, Judge and Queen would be 18, Caesar would be 17. I don't necessarily need them to be a part of any of this, but it's still interesting. The West Blue is known for being the underworld capital of the world, so that ties back into the Morgans point, because they're from, if they were involved in the West Blue, we know that Morgans was, one of the underworld bosses, right? along with Dufeld, who probably operated out of the West Blue. Capone was born in the West Blue. He would only be 4 years old during this time. We're not going to necessarily get into that, but if Crocodile flees God Valley and ends up shacking up with one of the 5 underworld bosses working out of the West Blue, then that could be where Crocodile gets his drip and his sauce from. What if he ran into Dufeld? What if Dufeld was like his mentor after this? Another big thing that we could see here, parents. We could see some Straw Hat parents. People already believe that Ginny is Luffy's mom. I'm like I said earlier, I'm team Ginny's gonna die. I mean, I'm okay with it. She's holding meat. It's, I think it's a red herring. Anyway, other characters that are too young to play a role in God Valley that were born in the West Blue, their parents could have played a role here. Lafitte would be 3 years old. What if Lafitte and his parents were from God Valley? Jozu is born in the West Blue. He would be 4 years old at this time. So did he get orphaned and needed a family? And then you have Jozu and Marco as kids joining Whitebeard, and then he's raising these kids. And that's why they call him Pops, because he actually was their dad. Miss Valentine is way too young to be relevant here, but she's from the West Blue, so maybe her parents were involved here. Another thing that's kind of interesting is Baby 5 is from the West Blue. Also, way too young wasn't even born during this time, right? But they're the 5th baby, right? So if Baby 5's parents were slaves from God Valley, and because slaves didn't have a long life, that's why in Baby 5's flashback, all of the kids were just their numbers and were never given real names, because their parents were so messed up from being slaves and God Valley and all this other stuff that it's like, I'm not even going to get attached to these kids. You're just Baby 5. Last but not least, the celestial dragons that we could see. Imagine we see Homing, and this is a transformative moment for him. Maybe he's never gone to one of these games, and when he sees the depravity of all of these celestial dragons, it kind of clicks something for him, and he starts thinking about and meandering in his mind about, I'm going to take my 3-year-old son Doflamingo and my 1-year-old son Rocinante, and I'm going to just live amongst the people because I don't like my own kind. We can see Mjosgard being his depraved version, because this is before Odahime showed him the light. But personally, since we've seen Mjosgard have his redemption arc, I don't necessarily want to go back and see him as a bad guy again. We could see Jalmak, who's the celestial dragon that shot Sabo during the ASL flashback. We could also see Roswald, who I think is probably the most likely of all, and that's Charlos's father. And he would probably take a special interest in Kuma, considering that when Kuma was, returned to Marijoa, he was returned to the care of St. Roswald. So maybe he kind of claimed Kuma in some way? I don't know. It's weird, but I expect to see Roswald. And that's everybody that I think could play a role in the God Valley flashback. Will all of them play a role? No. Will some of them? I truly believe so, because I don't think that Oda would miss the opportunity to use this major event as a launch point for all of these characters. We're going to get Rocks pulling up. We're going to get Roger probably already being there as the convenience of it all. Garp and other Marines are going to come to protect the Celestial Dragons from Rocks. We're going to see a lot of twists and turns, and unfortunately, there's also the possibility that we don't really dive into all of that until we get it from Garp's POV, and we just stick with Kuma and track where he goes in his life. And then we'll get the rest of God Valley later, because I'm sure that so much of this will clue us into the end game that Oda will probably hold out on us. But it's still fun to think about, and Oda has given us enough right now for me to talk about all of this today. Well, there's going to be a lot more to discuss, and I'm very excited for that. We're going to have a Theory for Theory this Sunday, and we'll have 1096 the following week, which I think will be my birthday chapter this year. So, God Valley Flashback for a birthday chapter. I'm into it. Let's get Crocodile in there. Come on, Oda. Come on. All right. Like, comment, subscribe if you are feeling the vibe. Thanks, everybody. Later.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.